Hello everybody, welcome back to Bald Bias. Today, it's finally time I talk about the Vulp Pro. Because, obviously, I have not done that yet, because I've been out of the community for a while. So, I knew about the Vulp Pro. Me and Ethan, I can say this because Brandon said it in this video. Me and Ethan were part of a small group that got to see the Vulp Pro very early and got to see early prototypes in hand and were shown the original design file for this bad boy and asked what our thoughts were. So I had known the Vulp Pro was coming for a very long time. Now what I didn't know was coming was that there was going to be a false edge live blade. Didn't know that. But I had known about the Vulp Pro for a long time. And starting at square one with the Vulp itself, the Vulp, I know some people don't like it, and I understand that. But the Vulp changed the balisong market in a way. The Vulp opened the floodgates to so many possibilities, and it provided what is a rare thing, which is a one-stop default baseline answer to the question, what balisong should I buy? Which is always a stupid question to ask because there are so many factors that go into that. But when the Vulp came out, if someone said, I have under $100, what balisong do I buy? My answer was immediately Vulp. Because the Vulp came with everything you'd need, including one of the best pivot tools that I still use on every single one of my balisongs. It came with everything you need. The bushings are well tuned in the newer versions. They were a little rocky at first, but they're a lot better now. The bushings are well tuned, and it just provided a great balisong for learning on. Good texture where you needed it. Of course, it was aluminum, so it was a little bit slippery. It was bead blast aluminum. Amazing jimping for learning things like ladders. It provided a very, very good learning experience. And that was perfect. That was great. That was exactly what the Vulp needed to be. And that is exactly what the community needed, was a one-stop default answer for beginners. And it was the Vulp. So now you have a company, Bally's, who kind of came out of the gate with really not much notoriety before the Vulp. I mean, the Morse was very cool, but they weren't there yet. They didn't quite have it figured out yet. But when they collaborated on the Vulp, that's when the Bally's started to find their footing. And now we have the Vulp Pro, now we have the Wing, now we have the Marbles, now we have the Canyon. The Bally's has been sweeping the market with banger after banger after banger. Everything they've put out recently has been fantastic. But, it kind of started that uphill trend. Started with the Morse. They had a good product going. They had a good idea. And then the Vulp came, and then they really started to figure it out. And now we're kind of riding that wave of Bally's has this figured out. And now they're just experimenting, which is great to see. I think the Wing is one of the coolest balisong designs I've seen in a long time. I love the handles of that. Anyways, that is important to the story. But, yeah, the Vulp shook up the market because for once we had a default answer. I'm going to take a drink of my battery acid here. This straight up looks like radioactive waste. But hey, Baja Blast. Got a blast. So the Vulp shook up the market, and I want to give Will and Brandon and Bally's, everyone at Bally's, a huge congratulations for all of the work they have done and how big of a deal the Vulp is, because it would have been very easy for them to just fuck it up. There are so many things on a balisong that you can just fuck up, and just the whole thing is bad now. But they got it right. They got everything that they needed to right. But when you get into more advanced flipping and stuff where that requires a little bit better of a flow, the Vulp tended to kind of fly out of your hands a little bit. And that was just due to the overall design and weight distribution. The Vulp just tended to be a little bit inconsistent with some higher end flipping. The one that everyone immediately points to is the chaplain on the Vulp, which I didn't even think was that bad, probably because I don't do insanely tight chaplains. I do them more as like a transitional trick. But that issue with chaplains carries over to a lot of other tricks. It is not just the chaplain that is rough on the Vulp. There is a lot of other things that require very tight turnarounds in the momentum. So the Vulp didn't quite have it didn't offer nearly as much to higher end flippers, which is fine because that wasn't the point. That is something you need to keep in mind. If you're grilling the Vulp, comparing it to your $400 whatever that, comparing it to something like, even comparing it to like the Kraken, which a lot of people use as the baseline, no shit, it's not going to be a high tier flipper because it's $60 or like $250. That is not the market it was aimed at all. For a beginner balisong, it's absolutely phenomenal, one of the best. But for an advanced balisong, it's not. So, Will and Brandon knew this, obviously, because they designed the damn thing. When it came time to make a Vulp Pro, they had a few options. And Brandon talked about in this video, let me get my computer back up here. It's called What Does Brandon Baker Think of the Vulp Pro? It's on Will Hirsch Flips. I was just watching that video, then I remembered, oh yeah, I still have to make a blade bias video for the Vulp Pro, so let me do that. He talked about that the original Vulp Pro, which the prototype that I had tried in hand at Blade Show, was a small incremental improvement over the Vulp. And it would have been a slight price increase, and that is fine. However, I think the route that they went down was a significantly better one, because instead of making product and then another product with a slight increase, and then another product with a slight increase, and maybe another one after that, they just went boom, boom. Beginner flippers, high tier, intermediate flippers. Easy. They don't need anything else, because the Vulp Pro offers everything that the Vulp did not at still a very competitively priced price point. The Vulp Pro offers a much more reliable and comfortable balance. The grip is significantly better. It is a very, very good and reliable flipper, and it's still light. It still fits what the modern community wants, which is very different from what the old community wants. And I do believe Will and Brandon know and understand that, because this is very much a modern balisong. So, mini review of the Vulp. This is a Vulp Pro. This is not a actual review. This is just kind of like I've had it for a few days and I'm thinking about it. Obviously, I have to pull out the Cygnus. I just have to. Because look, they are very similar for a handful of different reasons. But also the Cygnus is like $600 or something like that. So it is a very different market. Do I think the Cygnus is a better balisong? I do, yes. The price reflects that though. So you can't really compare these two in terms of performance, because the price does reflect that. Now in terms of design, I have already declared on numerous occasions that the Cygnus is probably my favorite designed balisong of all time. There is nothing that comes close to how absolutely just jaw-dropping this was when I first saw it. And I retain that opinion. But the Cygnus has a few shortcomings of its own, and Will made some good points here. The same reason I like the Cygnus is the same thing that Will tried to change because he didn't like it about the Cygnus. I like that there's titanium here because it's more smooth than the G10. So it has a smoother chaplain experience and a smoother feeling when you're doing these tricks, kind of like fanning. When you have this titanium kind of rubbing up against your hand, it is a smoother feeling. So Will, when designing the Vulp Pro, as far as I'm aware, thought that was kind of the opposite of what it should have done. It should have offered more grip there. And I can see how, from a performance standpoint, that is true. And that is something that is kind of just opinion-based. Now, the one thing I will say is that the Vulp Pro is very square. It is a very blocky, cubic balisong. There is not much going on in terms of, it is rounded, but it is not much compared to a lot of other balisongs, and especially compared to the Cygnus, which does have rounded actual, like, the handles are not flat with rounding. The handles are, well, it is flat with rounding, but it is a very, very, very large rounding. You can probably see there. It is a much more circular shape compared to the Vulp Pro, which is fine. It's kind of just a preference thing. Some people like round handles. Some people like completely square handles. It is up to you, but it is something to know. So the Vulp Pro has, first of all, one of the greatest side textures on a balisong that I have ever seen without it just being straight sandwich. Sandwich is peak because it is very, very grippy and always gives your finger something to grab onto. But on a channel balisong, this is about as good as it gets. The entire side is textured in one way or another. This jimping carries over from the original Vulp, which is extremely aggressive, which I think is, not a bad thing at all. I personally think jimping should be aggressive, and it annoys me when jimping doesn't do anything, but the Vulp jimping is one of the best because it is so aggressive and it is on both sides. And then you have this giant ass, like, fake speed channel, which is even more aggressive than the one, even on the dual tone Kraken. It is significantly more aggressive than any fake speed channel I have ever seen on a balisong, only beaten by an actual speed channel. But it provides just as much grip as an actual speed channel, almost as much. And then you have up here, you have these 3 lines on G10, which is a very grippy point. Texturing on G10 is very, very grippy. So you have amazing grip through the side of the handle. Moving out of the front of the handle, you have amazing grip all the way up because you have texture in between some G10 and then a nice G10 strip with a cutout in it all the way down the front. This thing is just screaming good grip. And on top of that, you have this nice polished aluminum texture to the actual aluminum itself, which is grippier than bead blasted aluminum, which is why my favorite balisong to flip my favorite balisong to flip that I own is my polished Kraken trainer, my polished speed channeled Kraken trainer. My polished speed channeled Bowie Kraken is my favorite to flip because it's just so good in terms of comfort and grip. Polished aluminum is a million times better than bead blast aluminum, and you cannot change my mind. And once you try polished aluminum and spend a good amount of time with it, you start to realize that. And Abellies and Will and Brandon have realized that. So when Will and Brandon were designing this, I feel like Brandon doesn't get enough credit here because I know how much work he has put in to this whole process, and especially all of the marketing and back-end work and all of the negotiation. Brandon deserves his credit too. He is more than just a cameraman. I love you, Brandon. Anyways, so when Will and Brandon and Abellies were designing this and putting this whole thing together, they thought of every single point. Every single point of contact with your hand has something to help with grip, and that is fantastic. And a beautifully rounded spine, amazingly comfortable chaplains, and what they did is they moved the weight distribution a little bit. So this tip got pretty chunky. It is a chunkier tip, so you have more weight on the tip, and also this G10 will lose some weight up here because G10 is lighter than aluminum, lose some weight up here, and add weight down here because now we're cutting out a lot of material up here, but all this material is going to stay intact. So it's going to be heavier at the bottoms than it is towards pivots. And that is one thing that Will did not like about the Cygnus, is that you have weight here, but all of this, there's no weight here because it is not only a cutout, but it is also G10 on top of the cutout. So it is a little bit funky with the weight distribution because there's a big hole in the middle that kind of messes with things. But the Vulp Pro has a little bit more of a standard weight distribution, which is tip and end weight. Of course, there's a lot of weight. It is carefully, distributed throughout. But this is more of a tip and end weight distribution compared to the original Vulp. That is what I'm in comparison here. Compared to the original Vulp, it is a little bit more of a standard tip and end weight scenario. So that leads it to a much more, if I can flip, a much more consistent and a much more fun flipping experience. And so the Insane Grip partnered with the better weight distribution and overall better texture and better experience leans this a lot more towards a more competitive flipper, a more intermediate to higher level balisong. And I think that is a perfect partnership to the original Vulp, because the original Vulp was almost entirely just for beginners. That is the audience that bought a Vulp, and that is the audience that the Vulp was made for. But now we have the Vulp Pro, which is almost entirely targeted towards intermediate to advanced flippers. Excuse me. Whether they meant to do that or not, that is where this sits. So now you have one product that is made for beginners and a second product which is made for more intermediate or advanced flippers. And that market covers everything. You don't need to have 8 different products when you just have 2 really, really solid ones. A lot of companies will start to overstep on their own toes, not even just in balisongs, just in life in general, because they try to cater to too many specific niche audiences. But that can be a good thing. But in general, especially when you're first starting out, just make a lower level one and a higher level one. And that is exactly what they did. And even then, the Vulp Pro is only, $140, I think, for the trainer blade? Maybe like $160 for the live blade. My numbers could be wrong. That's still good trainer price. You're still well in the category of what people would be willing to pay for a good balisong trainer. So it's not like it's very expensive either. It's even cheaper than some that I've seen. Some of the common ones even it's cheaper than. But you're in a price range that fits the product, and you're in a performance bracket that needed to be saturated. So in my opinion, the Vulp Pro was a great addition to the market and is basically the perfect cheaper trainer balisong in its price range. It is basically as good as you can get in a intermediate trainer balisong. In my opinion, once you get past like that $200 mark, it's really not worth having a trainer anyways. But that is my opinion. But this is about as good as it's going to get in its price range, to be honest. Really, the only competition I personally see for the Vulp Pro is the Prisma Pro. And even then, the Vulp Pro offers things that the Prisma does not. And the Prisma does offer things that the Vulp does not. So it is more of a preference thing. But, a lot of times when we talk about price ranges for balisongs, there are 5, 6, 7, 8 different options. Nowadays, before it wasn't that way, but nowadays there are so many options of things you can buy in every price range. So to have a price range that only 1 or 2 items really occupy, that I am comfortable recommending to basically everyone, is rare. The Vulp did it. Like I said earlier, in the under $100 beginner trainer, the Vulp was that default recommendation for a lot of people. And now the Vulp Pro, in my opinion, is basically that recommendation. And I would like to clarify, I do not own one of these. The Bellies did not send me one. This is Ethan's that I am just borrowing. So, I have to send this back, and I'm going to miss it. I'm genuinely going to miss having it when it goes away, when I have to send it back to Ethan. But I think that Will, Brandon, Nabales, and the whole crew have perfectly saturated the market that they needed to be in. Now they have a very beginner-friendly product in the original Vulp, and now they have a more intermediate to advanced product in the Vulp Pro, especially in the false live blade, which I think is very, very cool that exists. And they did it. They saturated the markets they needed to be in. They made every improvement needed to the Vulp. And they made what I would consider to be basically a perfect balisong trainer in its price range. And that is my complete and honest opinion. And because I know every single one of you in the comments are fiends, and you're going to ask me, what about this? Well, have you tried this yet? What about this? I've tried a lot of balisongs, and 99% of them you try. When you get to a certain point where you have tried a large majority of balisongs people commonly recommend, a lot of the time you try them and you're just, Not a lot of balisongs kind of give you a lasting impression on good or bad. And the Vulp Pro is one of the balisongs that has given me a lasting good impression. And I think that is really cool. So yes, good job, Will, Brendan, everyone at Nabales, and everyone involved for making this happen. You guys absolutely nailed it. And I say that with complete confidence. And I would probably am going to buy one of these sometime soon, because I don't have one. So I'm going to have to purchase one of these. Definitely getting an Albert first, though. I've been in love with Albert since I got him. But yeah, that's about it, I guess. Good job to everyone involved. It came out really freaking good. So yeah. Thank you to everyone for watching. I will see you guys all again soon. And bye-bye.